everyone, and welcome to another quick guide. Today we're going to be taking a look at Baiken and our detonate mechanics. So the first test we're doing here is going to be with our crit damage Baiken, and then the second one you see here is going to be with our attack Baiken. And then the third test will be on the mola of the skill. So here's the first test. This is our crit damage Baiken. See a really nice S2. Now we're going in and doing the S3 here with Soulburn. Got some really good damage here coming up on the initial hit, then some decent detonate damage. So now here's our second Baiken. You're going to see it's on attack, so a little bit less on the S2. And on the S3, you're going to see not that great of damage here, but really good detonate damage. Now the third one, you're going to see with the mola of the S3. So let's see how much damage this does. So a little less bleeds here, and still does pretty good damage. So now we're going to go and take a look at our results here. So pulling up my document here. So first the crit damage focus build, then we're going to look at the attack focus build, and then we're going to look at the attack focus build and look at the scaling of the 5 times Molagora, so the 30% increased damage. So number one here, we have the crit damage focus build. We've got about 24,000 damage here on the initial hit on Soulburn, and then about 33,000 with the detonate. So if we look at the numbers here, we did about 2,200 damage per bleed dot, because it takes into account the turns. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4. So that's on the crit damage focus build. So next we look at the attack focus build. So we see here we did about 18,000 damage just over on the S3 Soulburn, and then we did 34,474 damage here with the dots calculated in. So if we look at this here, we have about 2,678 damage per dot, pretty much exactly here. So now for our third test, what we did was I wanted to see if the detonate damage was scaling on Molagora, so I upped my Molagora one. So we have 20,807 damage on the first hit of the Soulburn, and then 34,197 damage on the second hit. And if we do the math here, we can see that the damage exactly aligns with the pre-mola. So we know that on the Molagora, it's actually only going to scale off of the initial damage and not off the detonate damage. So that's something to take into account when we start talking about Baiken. So now let's go on with our recommendations for Baiken. So let's talk about Baiken. I would build her on a speed hit or speed crit set, to be honest. I'd want to get as close to 100% crit, and two of the kind of build options I'd go with is either an attack speed, effectiveness, and crit percent build, or attack speed, hit, crit percent, and crit damage build. And as you add more mola to your skills with that extra damage, the second build becomes more viable. If I don't have any of those sets, you could also build her on secondly attack damage set or a crit damage set. Although I wouldn't really recommend her building her on a red set, as it doesn't impact the detonate damage. So I know there's a lot of questions about that, but there's been some testing, and really that's how it works. With any other build other than the speed hit or speed crit set, I would recommend trying to have her as a big time nuker and forcing some other combat readiness on her team and not relying on her for a lot of the combat readiness, because she will be a bit slower. So based on this, what artifacts are we going to use for her? So I would recommend either using an RNL if you're on speed, attack, hit, crit percent, and crit damage build, or you can use the sleeve if you're doing more of a pure attack build. They're around the same tier. They both have their strengths and weaknesses. Overall, I think if you have no crit damage and very little Mola investment, the sleeve's going to be a much better option. If you have full Mola, RNL might be a little bit better depending on the content you're doing. But that's dependent on your playstyle, your composition, and things like that. Also, if you have another bleeder, RNL might be a bit better because you can roll more detonates and roll more combat readiness. So now let's talk about what can I use her for. So a lot of people are asking, where do I use Baiken? She's extremely comp reliant, in my opinion. She excels in PvP, and but or sorry, in PvE, but for PvP content right now, she just gets outshined by a lot of the other new heroes. So unless you want to build a really big PvP comp around her, I don't see her being in the top tier. In PvE, she's pretty good nuker. Can be really good if you have the right team, and she's a good CR booster also. So she can be really effective in that PvE content. She's great for Golem 11 and just annihilates Banshee 11. She's good for some raid bosses and abyss floors, but depending on the specific mechanics of the boss, like Jubilee Cancel, obviously she's awful. So with Executioner Carcanus, she's also pretty awful for that content. So it's just gonna be really dependent on where you put her in for abyss or raids, whether she'll shine or not be really an asset to your team. PvP, she can go up to around mid to high level PvP, but at end game she's really going to fall off, and she's only going to perform well if you have a team built around her. That's my opinion, at least. It could change with shifting of meta and stuff like that. In Guild Wars, kind of the same thing, although she'd fare a bit better in Guild Wars because she can kind of hold her own a bit, although she is quite squishy being a thief. So with our Molagoras, let's talk about that. If you really want to use her, I would recommend investing +4 in everything, and when you get to +5 investments, it's just going to be that extra damage on the skill alone. So it's a very low return on rate on the investment for the Molagora. So I wouldn't really recommend +15ing her unless you're going this really big crit hit damage Baiken, although that could change in future patches if the Molagora damage affects the detonate damage. So now we get down to the final question, which is, should I pull or invest Molagora in Baiken? If you're looking for a PvP monster who just annihilates and dominates everything, I would look somewhere else. I would just pass on Baiken. She's not going to fit your teams in the current meta. Maybe she will down the road and you want to pull for her. That's fine, but my recommendation is to pass if you're looking for a straight PvP character. If you like her character, you're a waifu collector, or you're willing to invest in a really interesting character and build a composition around her, I would definitely commit to this endeavor. So just note that all this advice and everything can change depending on what characters are released and if we see any balancing changes. So just like to thank everyone for sticking around and watching. If you have any comments or questions, please just let me know and have a good rest of the day.